Okay, hello and welcome to today's PSU transportation seminar. My name is Leming Wang, and I will be introducing and moderating today's seminar. And I don't have the pointer yet. Okay. Our PSU transportation seminars have been a tradition since year 2000, and the seminars are once again being held live on PSU's urban campus, located on the ancestral homelands of the Monoma, Katslamet, Clackamas, Tumwater, and Walala bands of Chinook, the Tualatin, Kalapuya, and many other indigenous nations of the Columbia River. It's important to acknowledge that we are here because of their sacrifices forced on the indigenous ancestors of this place. Remember these communities and to honor their legacies, lives, and descendants. Today, we are pleased to have Caleb Winters and Pamela Vasudeva, sorry to butcher your last name pronunciation there, presenting incorporating equity into planning for operation and transportation system management. Caleb Winter is a senior transportation planner for Metro, leading the region's transportation system management and operations. I just learned that it's pronounced TISO, right? TISMO, sorry, TISMO. A new acronym to add a long list we're accumulating here. TISMO program, seeing the high cost of an imbalanced transportation system with dependencies on privately owned vehicles. He started his career with transit research and moved into planning. Caleb's first TISMO assignment was to incorporate transportation demand management into the region's first 10-year plan. His role as TISMO program manager started in 2014, and he led the plan update in 2021. Now his focus turned to implementation by continuing partnership with community-based organizations and convening transportation system engineers to deploy technology innovations such as next generation transit signal priority. Caleb is co-chair of two TRB subcommittees, the Travel Demand Research Task Force, AEP 60, and Regional TISMO Planning for Operations, ACP 10. I have a separate slides for Pam. Pam, who joins us remotely, is the statewide transportation system management and operations deployment engineer at WSDOT. In her current role, she is responsible for developing the state's TISMO program plan that supports WSDOT's multimodal system and addressing system needs across the state, including both urban and rural. She's been in the industry for 18 years in both Washington and California. Her responsibilities have included policy development, long-term planning, alternative analysis, and the early design phase of project implementation. Throughout her career, she has been committed to improve the operation and efficiency of the multimodal transportation system with an overarching goal to provide safe, reliable, and cost-efficient options for those that walk, bike, and take transit. Here's a quick preview of our upcoming seminars. You can also find those on our website. An overview of today's seminar, you can expect our speakers to present for about 40 minutes, followed by a Q&A. We will be receiving questions through the Q&A feature on the control panel, if you participate remotely, of course. And And we will, Becca will help us ask those questions at the end of the presentation. If we run out of time for all your questions, we will give our speakers the opportunity to email written responses for any questions left unanswered. We will enable closed captions, but you must click on the CC feature on your control panel to view them. We will be recording today's seminar. It will be available on our website later today, along with the presentation slides. If you're tracking professional credit hours, this webinar is eligible for 1 hour of continuing education credit. With that, I will hand it over the control to.
Thank you, Li Ming. And I think actually our first presentation is going to be Pam starting us out. And we're going to kind of dynamically go between Pam, remote, and I think the Seattle area, right?
Yes.
Thank you. For working for WSDOT, and then we'll come back to me, then to Pam, then back to me, and then Q&A, like Li Ming said, and have some discussion at the end.
Great, thank you, Caleb, and thank you, PSU, for hosting us today. As mentioned earlier, my name is Pam Vasudeva. I work for Washington State Department of Transportation, just north of you all in the Oregon area. Caleb and I are really honored to share with you today what it means to incorporate equity into TSMO. Our session will include a high-level TSMO 101 introduction and why TSMO needs to be a tool to advance our equity and justice goals. An overview of Oregon Metro's award-winning TSMO strategy with an equity focus, application of traditional and smart TSMO solutions, and finally, an interactive Q&A to consider how to address existing equity challenges. We have a lot to cover today, so I'm going to get right into it. As I mentioned, I work for Washington State Department of Transportation, and I'm honored to have a leader that is both cutting edge and a face for the country. He is not only our executive director, he's not only our secretary, but he's also the president of AASHTO. In his message in the state and nationally, he states we must build a resilient transportation system that is safe, sound, and smart. That means we're pivoting away from being a capital expansion agency or building stuff to one that expands the use of TSMO, or transportation system management and operations, and operational strategies as a whole by making them a key component of transportation investments, rather than an afterthought in capital project development. At WSDOT, transportation system management and operations is defined as building partnerships both internal and external to WSDOT to create an aligned system vision. That means not only are we working within the operation team, but we need to work with planning, operations, design, maintenance, and construction. We must implement processes to continuously improve and manage. Sorry, my dog is saying hello to you all. To continuously manage and adjust system performance. That includes looking at how things are operating. And when we see there's opportunities to fix it, we have the opportunity with TSMO strategies to go in and make improvements. And lastly, and most probably commonly known, is deploying existing and new tools and approaches, such as ITS, emerging technologies, and transportation demand management to improve our system efficiencies. What this means for us at WSDOT, and I think many leaders across the country are moving in this direction, we must start by operating and managing what we already have. And when we do plan for expansion, including filling in multimodal gaps, it's important to take an operational approach to achieve this. Our priority is to operate and manage our existing assets using continuous improvement processes to amend the system to ensure it functions at its optimal. When we do need to make modifications, it requires doing it with a TSMO mindset. That means incorporating integrated system improvements to measure and monitor performance. And TSMO strategy should be incorporated into the scoping and programmatic phase of project delivery and design solutions. Should include TSMO tools to operate and manage the system beyond implementation. The benefits of TSMO are, however, not created equal. In other words, the more you invest in TSMO strategies correlates to a greater return in achieving your goals. safe system that utilizes engineering tools to minimize the harm to those using our system. TSMO also allows us to employ smart design standards that are efficient and cost-effective over the project lifecycle. It also allows us to create a sound system that ensures that we have a complete network that allows all modes to traverse our facility safely. The chart that you saw on the screen shows the magnitude of expected benefits for different levels of TSMO investments as compared to traditional capacity-based approaches. Small-scale level 1 TSMO investments like signing and striping or targeted ITS can be deployed quickly and may be done with little involvement with groups outside operations and maintenance. But their benefits tend to be more limited in magnitude and extent than higher investment solutions. By applying higher level 2 and 3 TSMO investments, such as enhanced bus rapid transit corridors, freeway active traffic management systems, and broadband can achieve more significant benefits because they feature highly integrated and coordinated solutions tuned specifically to address key objectives. However, such solutions require much greater internal and external coordination and involvement throughout the project development process. What you want to see on the screen here shows TSMO in its rural context. You can see when you do something simple like a level 1 solution, putting in targeted ITS, you create a safer system. But look at the potential that you could have when you start working with your partner agencies to create a coordinated system, and when you have road weather management, so that you can help inform people about the conditions on the roadway, what the potentials are on our rural facilities. Similarly, in the urban and town center context, we can do simple ITS solutions and signing and striping on our facilities. But what could happen if we add more investments, such as reimagining and enhancing our infrastructure and creating partnerships and adding transit features to make it more of a multimodal facility. Similarly, TSMO can be applied on a limited access roadways, like I showed in the other examples. With a level 3 investment, we can make significant improvements to reimagine and enhance infrastructure and operations to fully optimize for new mobility options and users. We must be open to the changing climate of our transportation system. Yes, as transportation professionals, we understand project needs. And there are greater obstacles we must prioritize to improve our system performance. The graphic above shows crash trends from 2013 to 2022 of traffic fatalities and serious injuries on public roadways. WSDOT and many other states across the country are seeing an uptick in the number of fatal and serious injuries. And as reported in New York Times in 2022 through 2023, pedestrians and bicycle deaths are on the rise. In Washington state, pedestrian bicycles account for over 22% of all traffic deaths on our streets, far above the mode share or miles traveled on our streets. And there's an alarming gap in those that are impacted by on our roads, with a disproportionately high number of fatal and serious crashes within minority and underserved neighborhoods. Environmental justice has to be our priority until the same degree of protection against environmental and health harms for all people using our facilities are resolved. TSMO offers the tactical and strategic solutions for us to get there. To dissect this, we must take a step back and look at the data. 24% of census block groups, including people that are Black, Indigenous, and of color, and 33% of fatal and serious crashes occur in these locations. 44% of census blocks have higher poverty levels than the average in the state, and accounts for 51% of the fatal and serious injury crashes. And the map that you see also shows where their communities exist in Washington, where these communities exist in Washington state. In Washington, we define these tracts as vulnerable road users, which is based on persistent poverty, tribal locations where there are tribal lands, social vulnerability index based on the CDC, environmental health disparities, which is an index that is developed in Washington by the Department of Health, disadvantaged community scores based on WSDOT and census tracts, that include school density, transit stop density, and transit route mileage density. On the next slide, you can see this. You can see what this looks like on our streets. Many vulnerable communities are located in areas with wide, fast, busy roads, whether those are state highways or local arterials. They're disconnected, or there's no sidewalks, and many people in these communities are reliant on active transportation and public transportation. And lastly, many of them live in areas with the highest rates of exposure to transportation-related greenhouse gas emissions. On the next slide, you can see what the rising trend from 2013 through 2022 were the number of pedestrians and to some degree bicycle fatalities that are rising in our state, which means we can no longer prioritize safety without also prioritizing safety improvements in vulnerable communities. I'll spend a few minutes just walking through some of the demographic trends we're observing in Washington, including the significantly higher rate of fatal and serious crashes in tribal communities, followed by those that are two or more races. And the proportion of fatal and serious crashes that exist on urban streets that have speed limits between 25 to 35 miles per hour. So it's not just our high speed facilities, but it's on our urban 20 to 25 mile roadways as well. And that the crashes happen throughout the day with a peak at 5 to 6 p.m. Could this be because of wide signal spacings, increased free flow speeds and congestion, free flow speeds with a lack of congestion, coupled with increased walking and biking? So to close with the data, I just want to say, to achieve transportation equity and justice, LA, Los Angeles DOT, is advancing a universal basic mobility to ensure every community member has access to dignified, reliable, safe, and affordable transportation that serves all of their needs. Applying effective solutions like TSMO to equity addresses imbalanced social systems. But by applying justice, like they're doing in LA, can take equity one step further by fixing the systems in a way that leads to long-term, sustainable, equitable access for generations to come. This includes safety improvements in underserved communities, expanding multimodal and active transportation access, technology to improve access and traveler information, improvements that focus on reducing emissions, and avoidance of future harm. Before we talk about the solutions that we can look for on the ground, Caleb will introduce you to Oregon Metro's TSMO equity tree, which allows them to lead with an equity lens. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Pam. I really appreciate the leadership in WSDOT, that is a similar policy that we have in our state and for the metro region to use the existing system as best we can, and and for all the planning outcome reasons that we need it to do. And Pam and I met after the beginning of the pandemic, both working on plans, thinking about these bigger questions. And so I'll start just by, I guess I have the clicker. Actually, I should have put this in the comments below, but this was a study with Josh Roll at ODOT and Nathan McNeil here at PSU to study that indeed in Oregon, fatal pedestrian injury rates are higher by race. Black, Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islanders have like twice as higher rate than white folks in Oregon. So a real echoing what WSDOT has found in data as well, and recognized as these are systemic issues with the segregated housing landscape that contributes to different transportation experiences that people in our state have. And so it's kind of with that we set out, like in my introduction, I started helping with one aspect of Metro's 2010 TSMO strategy, focusing on demand management. And then in 2014, became the TSMO program manager And, some of the things that we did back then, equity was one of many outcomes, safety, it was equal points in projects and in consideration, certainly a valuable outcome. Reliability, a lot of the congestion kind of aspects, and climate. But what we moved to is, let's begin projects with racial equity. Let's incorporate people's voices to initiate priorities. We had a multimodal approach that was pretty advanced. There's a lot of traffic-only solutions going on in TISMO world, and like I mentioned, demand management was part of ours. But really questions, really at the TPAC table, Transportation Policy Advisory Committee at Metro, asking me directly as I present, like, how bad congestion is. Whose congestion are we talking about? What are their mobility and access needs once we get into it? And then, we still have a lot of decisions being made based on residential demographics, equity focus areas around the region, but we need to move to where the voice needs are, and knowing the origin destination data that helps complete trips. So that, and then squiggly chart, it's not real data here, but it's just talking about how planners like me get involved in something that involves a lot of technical traffic engineering, technology through intelligent transportation systems. For a project like updating our strategy, that really involves a lot of planning leadership, but everybody's engaged. You could think of this as a project related chart as well, so that, once a plan or a project, once we move past that, we're relying on designers, owners, operators of the right of way. We have some construction projects like Pam highlighted, and we'll go into more deep examples soon. And then traffic operators, transit operators. Finally, once that's implemented, whether it's a strategy or through a project, then we have operations and maintenance picking up. So it just kind of shows you how many people are involved. Certainly a planner is not doing, can't do this alone. Okay. So at Metro, our planning process is really like moving from vision all the way into actions, and in between we go through developing goals, objectives, performance measures, what those performance measures target, what they're supposed to accomplish. We're building off the 2018 Regional Transportation Plan. That's one RTP for the whole region, and strategies like freight, transit, active transportation, safety, all contribute to how we achieve those outcomes. So a strategy in our nomenclature is a series of actions to achieve desired outcomes. And so we had our next 10 years adopted by Metro Council January 2022. So we began with building on that 10 years of experience. Like I said, we got some multimodal achievements going, but really a sense of needing more diverse voices with input to our strategy for the next 10 years. And I'll show the Stakeholder Advisory Committee in a moment. And we had focus groups, involved community-based organizations in various aspects, had workshops. And equity really is a policy change from the 2018 RTP in regional policy that we're incorporating. And it like I said, we had equity in our 2010 plan, but it really was just in the vision statement. And it was so lightly defined that a lot of people felt it was geographic equity, like you got to invest in Clackamas as well as Multnomah County and Washington County. And that's, that's a minor aspect. So we thank Avi and Krishnan for joining us on the advisory committee, and we had great leadership at the director level, isn't it? And like Pam shared, having a secretary of the state DOT is a great way to show that these things we're planning for have some buy-in and have had input from that director level. Our first task was to build around equity from policy developed in 2016. It's hidden now, but I'll read it to you. So that Metro leaders agreed that by addressing the barriers experienced by people of color, we will effectively also identify solutions and remove barriers for other disadvantaged groups. And I heard, I think on a podcast, Tamika Butler say, there's a lot of people say equity and they have, it's like painting a house. You want to paint a house blue, but you might have light blue in mind and the other person has navy blue. And so the outcome you're headed to isn't quite agreed upon just by saying it. So the racial equity focus comes from, systemic racism here in the Portland region, and trying to reverse that, and starting with that will also help people with disabilities and seniors, older adults, and youth, and any but it's just the defining approach from the policy. So to get we tried. We worked with Fair and Pierce. They're great consultants, and we said, hey, can we please have a one-pager, because we're not going to be, able to have a completely separate report read on equity. We want people to work through like a flow chart, some if, then, yes, no questions. It's got to be logical, right? That's not what an equity question is. You have to begin. So we began at the roots of, what's the context? What are the historic disparities that affect quality of life? Choices, what's available to the project area or the region as a whole? Who's voicing needs? Those things should start helping us define a problem. And it's they succeeded in making it a one-pager, but it's hard to read on a webinar and in the seminar room. So oregonmetro.gov/TISMO, I click on equity. But it goes through a bunch of meaningful questions that we developed, that just challenge the way we're doing things. Start at the roots, define the problem, follow up through the branches and leaves, identify keys to solving that problem. Continue up through the strategies and implementation. What are you developing as a solution? And then at the treetop, evaluate and be accountable to what the outcome was. So that could be a plan, that could be a project, and we can return to it again and again. And so I'll just stop with the goals, and before I turn it back to Pam. So we have some standard TISMO goals. Collaborate and partner regionally. That's where we get technological systems working interoperable between Clackamas County, City of Portland, sort of the classic regional role to, make things work in a bigger geography than just for one jurisdiction. And there is a very, I take it for granted all the time. We have great folks that work in a collegial, cooperative environment, and they're not the turf wars that other regions have. So, that's a hallmark of TISMO. So reliable travel choices, making that a system efficient, connecting them, and then we have, prepare for change. We don't have climate mentioned in that one, but that's the kind of disruptions we were talking about. So I'm timing myself to make sure we all have enough time. But the new ones are over, our vision, we responding to the Vision Zero goal and equity input from our advisory committee. We have people, isolated, not taking transit at night, fear of harassment, so we developed this keep everyone from harm goal. And then calling out equity and eliminating disparities as a goal as well. So we built the rest of the strategy off of that, and we'll have some examples where we are in implementing it, but I want to turn it back for WSDOT's examples first.
Sorry, it's always that mute button. You would think I learned by now. Thank you, Caleb. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Yeah, as Caleb mentioned, there's we now understand why equity needs to be really at the forefront of what we do, and now we want to spend some time talking about how TISMO can be the tool to help support our equity visions. And on the next slide, you'll see that once again, I want to start by diving deeper into some of the data. So before I talk about using our TISMO toolbox to support the vulnerable road users, I want to step back and share one additional snapshot we're seeing in our state in Washington, but I imagine it's very similar in Oregon. In 2022, pedestrians at non-signalized intersections, whether at a crosswalk or not, were the highest number of pedestrian fatalities on our facilities. And then just once again, to remind you, vulnerable populations are those that live in high poverty rates, have a higher number or a disproportionate number of people of color, and have a higher number of environmental toxins in their communities. So those that are that do live in these vulnerable communities are experiencing higher crashes where there's no signals, and to some degree at signal crossings as well. Similarly, when we look at the data for bicyclists, we can see that the highest rate of bicycle fatalities occurred at non-signalized intersections, followed by bicyclists sharing the right-of-way with cars, which infers that there's probably no dedicated roadways for bicycles to travel. As we all know, we've designed our system for cars. And as many of you have heard the saying, if you build roads, they will come. Traditionally, we have designed our streets and signals to optimize the flow of vehicle traffic, including more travel lanes and signal timings that improve traffic performance. And this all came at the expense of the vulnerable road user. We need to shift that paradigm to one that protects the vulnerable road users. We need to think about what we can do along the segments between intersections and intersections that allow for us to improve operations for them. Currently, we have wide signal spacings between our signals, and with less cars on the streets, or at least that was the case, and it's changing back, where we are experiencing more congestion. But during COVID, we saw a lot of free flow speeds. We need to start asking the tough question. Are we okay with some more congestion or longer queue lengths so that pedestrians and bicyclists have the time to safely clear an intersection? So for the remainder of the session, I promise no more data. Caleb and I will spend the rest of the session looking at how traditional and smart TSMOS processes and tools can be used to support our goals of achieving an equitable place for people to travel, equitable and just place for people to travel. As many of you have also seen before, we have this amazing opportunity to apply TSMOS solutions to support people reliant on public infrastructure, to move by transit, walking, biking, and rolling. And these improvements can support the shift for all users, not just the vulnerable ones, of how people navigate our system, and in some cases, possibly even foregoing a trip. The benefits extend from a reduction in greenhouse emissions to improve safety with fewer cars on the streets. And in my mind, the most important one is it allows us to have options and perhaps switch from driving to more active traveling on our facilities. When we design our roads, we have to ask the question, who are we designing them for? Is it for the cars, more lanes and free flow conditions, or if we want to design them for the multimodal user? We have to think more creatively about how we design the system and what trade-offs we're willing to make to achieve our desired goals. On the next slide, you'll see that the lane reallocation or repurposing of existing roadway is an opportunity to match the roadway with the context of the users on the facility. By designing a multimodal facility, you're providing more human scale improvements, like you see here, curb extension, so pedestrians have a shorter crossing distance. A median island to reduce the width so that you can narrow the width of the lanes and create a calming effect. And human scale pedestrian lighting to improve the visibility for pedestrians. On the next slide, you'll see another example of a road reclassification. This one is not on our facilities, but it's in San Diego. I figured who doesn't love sunny San Diego? And what we saw here is even in these sunny conditions, the volumes of speeds are like many other urban and suburban corridors, high. The change along this 1 mile corridor included 5 roundabouts with a single travel lane in each direction, median islands, and narrower streets. Together, the improvements contributed to safer pedestrian experiences. Crossing the road, the project also catalyzed several new mixed-use developments in the area and a reduction in travel speeds and crashes. On the next slide, you can see something that's maybe a little bit less traditional in the urban context, but I did want you to just to show a way of thinking outside the box. So for all you signal timing experts on the call, what you see on the screen now is an example where there were long queues on Queensgate and 182 in our South Central region. And the queues were a result of high left turn movements onto 182, which resulted in a left turn phase that reached its capacity, which meant that there's no more that in one or two left turn phases, cars were not able to clear the intersection, available for cars to clear the intersection, which was the result of those long queues on Queensgate. A traditional solution would mean widening the roadway to allow for one, if not two, new left turn lanes. And it would also require widening the receiving on-ramp bridge to accommodate the turning vehicles. To avoid the high cost, designers teamed up with the Transportation Operation Group to identify a solution that provided more for less. In this case, that meant replacing the traffic signal with a roundabout to increase the flow of left turns onto the highway without needing to widen the facility. And an additional outcome was a 95% reduction in injury crashes. And even more importantly, the remaining right-of-way that was not used for those additional left turn lanes was used to provide a multi-lane path for bicyclists and pedestrians. On the next slide, you'll see another option of repurposing, and maybe more of an urban environment, is to use an existing lane and converting it into a transit-only lane, and perhaps delineating it with red paint. In this example, the transit-only lane is a business access transit or BAT lane that is restricted to buses along the length of the street, sometimes throughout the day or during peak periods. At the intersection, vehicles, single occupant vehicles are allowed to make right turns into driveways and at intersections. Bicyclists and emergency vehicles during emergencies can use this lane at times. And the traffic signal can be converted to a transit signal priority, which allows the buses to be prioritized at the intersection before general purpose traffic. The result is buses are able to stay on schedule and remain a more competitive option to the car. On the next slide is another example, and this is on Dexter Avenue in my hometown, Seattle, where there was a wide two-lane urban facility. And over 20 years, the city invested in reimagining the streets to encourage walking, biking, and transit. Improvements included moving the bus stops away from the curb, in this case, by providing a floating island, which allowed for in-lane bus stops and provided bicyclists a transit-protected bicycle lane. As a result of the enhancements, as a result of the enhancements and by reducing speeds from 30 to 25 miles per hour, the city of Seattle observed 300 bike riders using the facility during the morning peak hours and an increase of 30% transit ridership and no change in travel times. On the next slide, you'll see a solution that's new to me, but I think it's been around for a long time. I know that Hawaii DOT is starting to aggressively implement speed cushions on state facilities. But the concept, once again, is not new, including Michigan DOT and local agencies such as Austin. As defined by NACTO, speed cushions are sometimes called speed humps or speed tables that include wheel cutouts to allow large vehicles to pass unaffected, while with also the intent of reducing passenger car speeds and a result making it a more inviting place for pedestrians to travel. Upon implementation, Hawaii has noted little impacts to traffic operations and 0 fatal and serious injuries. There are many things that we can do at the intersection as well. We can't, just because we're starting to see a trend more on our mid-block crossings, we still need to focus on our intersections as well. I want to spend a few minutes, and then Caleb will also expand on some of these thoughts of what we can do at our intersections. One of the simplest improvements at the intersection includes retiming our signals to prioritize pedestrian and bicycle movements. What you see on the screen is a photo provided by the city of Bellevue, just east of Seattle. The city is using near-miss video analytics to predict potential pedestrian conflicts between pedestrians and vehicles and preemptively making improvements. The before photos show potential pedestrian conflict points using the video analytic tool. By identifying the conflict points, the city added leading pedestrian intervals, or pedestrian head starts, as I understand they're called in Portland, to give pedestrians a 3 to 7 minute advance before vehicles are given a green indication. Though WSDOT doesn't currently use video analytics to predict near misses, our Northwest Regional Office has implemented leading pedestrian intervals at roughly 90% of our signals in the region. This is a low-cost enhancement and can be implemented in a short period of time, packed with pedestrian benefits, including increased visibility of pedestrians in the sidewalks, reduced conflicts between pedestrians and vehicles, increased likelihood of vehicles yielding to pedestrians, and enhance safety for pedestrians who may be slow to enter the crosswalk. On the next slide, you'll see my favorite intersection improvement, a pedestrian scramble or a barn dance, which provides an all-red signal phase for vehicles to allow which allows enough time for pedestrians to cross in any direction of the intersection, even diagonally. Yes, one phase, and you can cross 2 legs of an intersection, which eliminates the pedestrian vehicle conflicts. In some instances, the pedestrians can also travel along one leg of the intersection while the counter traffic flow is going. In this example, you will also notice the pedestrian crosswalk width is very wide, which is a great way for it to provide more distance between cars and pedestrians. And lastly, there are times when we want to consider adding a bicycle signal or additional phase to the existing signal to indicate a bicycle specific movement. The result is improved safety for bicyclists, such as providing guidance at intersections where they're making bicycle only movements, and at times provides them a leading bicycle interval. Probably don't need to get into too much of this because I know Portland's doing a fantastic job with implementing bicycle signals throughout the city. On the next slide, I do want to spend a few minutes talking about accessibility. Unfortunately, I didn't cover too much because there's so much that we can talk about around accessibility, but really our goal is how can we provide mobility for all? So on the next slide, when we think about how to make our streets and intersections accessible for everyone, we must also think about what we can do for those that are blind, hearing impaired, or have limited mobility. In this picture, the city of Seattle has added detectable profile methanol acrylate. The enhanced crossing provides patrons from a nearby lighthouse for the blind a tactile guideway to access buses on the other side of a busy intersection. Other solutions to consider include audible or accessible pedestrian signals that are voice activated to audibly guide the visually impaired across an intersection. And of course, making sure we have ADA accessible curb ramps for those in wheelchairs. On the next slide, I just wanted, after this, I will transition it because Caleb has a lot more to talk about around smart mobility. But I did want to just pause for a second and remind everyone that we can't do this in silo. Implementing multimodal solutions allowing our system requires working with our partners, putting the processes in place to monitor and improve what we have, and applying the appropriate tools to meet the contextual needs. In the following slides, you'll learn what it means to deploy solutions that allow us to operate and manage our multimodal system in collaboration with others. WSDOT worked in partnership with its local transit agency, Spokane Transit, to improve the speed and reliability from I-90 to a new transit facility on West Plain Transit Center near the Medical Lake Interchange. Improvements included a dedicated HOV off-ramp and a direct access to a new transit-only lane that fed to the transit center, and joint partnerships between Spokane Transit that allowed them to view WSDOT camera feeds on I-90. The benefits included travel time savings, which was because of the direct access to the transit center via the transit-only lanes that resulted in 5 to 7 minutes of travel time savings for the buses. Improved access to the transit center also allowed for increased service frequency of the existing routes. Real-time bus route management allowed Spokane Transit to proactively reroute buses in real time to preserve transit reliability and on-time performance. And as a result, the increased ridership on routes traveling through the transit center led to new opportunities for people to access the Amazon Fulfillment Center on the north side of I-90. On the next slide, I will show that we had a similar situation in Leavenworth, the highly tourist part of our state, where the city of Leavenworth, Washington State Patrol, and our regional office worked together to identify how they could improve pedestrian crossings along US 2. The Christmas Lighting Festival, which happens on this facility in downtown Leavenworth, takes place the first 3 weekends in December. In 2018, the event generated significant backups along US 2 for up to 4 miles at peak visiting times, impacting the Leavenworth community and not giving a dedicated place for pedestrians to cross from the parking lots and from the transit stops to the event. The highest amount of vehicle and pedestrian volumes occur during the first night of the festival. As a result, this led to unsafe movements for pedestrians to cross US 2, and the consistent stream of pedestrians walking also conflicted with vehicles trying to find parking or traveling through the downtown area. Other issues, like I mentioned, is the long delays, travel delays on US 2, and the traffic congestion increased the potential for secondary crashes, and increased response times and limited situational awareness for all parts of the event. By deploying adaptive signals with a pedestrian phase, where our DOT and city together were able to achieve an additional 3,500 more vehicles clearing the intersection, and the safety benefits for the pedestrians were obvious. And on the next slide, I want to say that really these are all great solutions, but in order to do this, we can't do it alone. We really have to start with our communities. So I want to close with just this. On the next slide, you'll see it's important for us to step back, and as Caleb had indicated, we need to ask the questions on the equity tree of who we are building the system for. As we've learned, low-income households are more dependent on walking and biking, and in the past, they were less likely to advocate for themselves. We must show up for them by meeting them where they are at. Does the traditional political process bring equity or environmental justice to the community? Let's think about how we can change the paradigm to one that provides justice for these communities that have historically been affected by our system and least heard. So with that, I want to transition it to Caleb, who will talk about Tismo technologies being deployed in Oregon. Thank you.
Thanks, Pam. So we'll just pick up, we were just talking about goals, and I'll skip over the rest of the chapters in the strategy just to get to how we use the equity tree to turn to actions. So the last chapter, chapter 5, is actions. And we brainstormed and cut the list down and made a bunch of actions we thought were important, sub-actions under others. We ended up with 21 actions, and as we looked to categorize how to make sense of them, we realized a lot of them were about listening and accountability. A lot of them, were some of what Pam just described, the actual concepts that turn into street solutions and technologies, and then the operator capability there. You see it on the transit side or in the traffic operations side, and then additional planning efforts. So I won't go through these in the interest of time, but the 21 actions are here, and let's talk about mobility on demand strategy. That's part of the big TISMO umbrella. Let's track and prioritize TISMO investments with BIPOC. Create a community listening program, something that I'm excited to work with Tammy Lee at PSU, who's working on a TISMO project and working on the portal data archive and analysis here at PSU. When we go into new investment of that, we will have more people at the table to talk about what's missing from data, what the needs are, how to analyze it differently. And then, on the street, various things from freight technology for ITS or, fares and transit. So that was what we were hoping to accomplish over the 10 years. And we realized at a rate of about 10 million, it's a lot, but it's not, it doesn't do that. We're not talking about some of the capital projects that Pam described. So, but just to realize these 21 actions, we estimated be, that much per year. And we're really at like 2 million. But one of the things a strategy does at the metro level is provide a reason and a path that, since we all agree in the region, to spend some funds into the program. And then through competitive grants, like City of Portland Zero Emission Delivery Zone, that smart system that's, mentioned in the sub-action of the TISMO strategy. We didn't have a lot to do with them winning that, but we get some added funds that kind of go towards this regional vision. And in the application process, we called out this equity questions. And so 10 points were about choices. How does this project improve mobility and access for underrepresented people? Got various responses that I paraphrased here. Communities of color use transit at higher rates. Installing the latest traffic controllers and data communications will get ready for next generation transit signal priority. And then, through some of the pedestrian solutions Pam mentioned, by improving safety through signal programming, we'll have these pedestrian head starts. And then one that we're working on at Metro, contribute to a region-wide data set for accessible, readable sidewalk data, and engage BIPOC and people with low incomes in that process, collaborate with people with disabilities. So those are kind of, we had, I think, a total of 9 or 10 projects out of that. So hopefully you've heard some news. There's a ITE International Award winner, the next generation of transit signal priority in use on Division FX. And they turned it off to get some findings and results, and that riders are getting as much as 8 minutes back in their day from the round trip. So really great outcome from that, as well as they realized their buses were burning 14% more fuel when they turned the signal system off. So, and this specific, it was a big metro planning process to develop the corridor, but the actual technology was, just again, convening ODOT and TriMet and working with getting some additional federal funds to make this big step in technology. Pam really covered the pedestrian head start, or the location or leading pedestrian intervals really well, so we won't, but you've seen these and hopefully experienced them around Portland. Clackamas County, it looks a little different. They have some right turn lanes, and it looks permissive to the driver. It's green light. We'll switch that to a red arrow. So if somebody hits the call button and crossing there, they won't legally be able to turn right and, more safely from a right hook. And these are following kind of where those choices questions came in our applications. This is, University of Washington has some funds from WSDOT for building out trip planning tools for people with disabilities. So it's a cross section of Seattle with the Space Needle as a circle up there. It's a pointer. And so what you're doing is setting the steepness you can tolerate uphill, downhill, and also whether there are barriers in the way, like you see in the picture. And we want to add more data to that data set, make it and their project actually touches Multnomah County, University of Washington, but not the other counties. So we want Washington and Clackamas County to benefit as well. This was a summary. I will spare the details on the summary. And we'll end with, neither Pam or I are working directly on automated enforcement, but it is a sub-action in our TSMO strategy. And I know Pam has some questions going on amongst her planning table, but about automated enforcement. And the news 2 weeks ago was that City of Portland's adding 20 more and upgrading some. So there'll be both red light running cameras and citations for speed. This has a safety outcome, 94% decrease in top end speeding. If those drivers going 11 miles per hour or more over the speed limit. And we see them distributed across the Portland area, some in, some not in low-income communities of color. So we wanted to have a little exercise. How much? We have 4 minutes. Sorry, I didn't have more time. Any questions you have, open for that, or if you want to contribute to our pedestrian safety toolbox discussion. Any? And online as well. I know we can receive some comments online.
Great. Yeah. Thanks, Pam and Kelly, for having maybe 4 or 5 minutes for the question and answer session. Feel free to submit your question for those of you who are online. And of course, raise your hand if you have questions. For those of you in the room, I would probably just start one. Certainly, I think I like all the example solutions you presented, both of you presented. Can you talk a bit about how do you prioritize, since you're talking about a number of different essentially objectives, goals for the TSMO programs at a state level, and WSDOT and TriMet and Metro. And since kind of equity is one, and then you have other objectives as well. So when you select where to essentially implement, how do you select and prioritize where to do a project and what technology, what solution you deploy?
Well, that's a great question. Thanks for asking. I can speak for WSDOT. Sorry, Caleb, if I jumped in front of you, I can't see who, if you're able to speak. But
after yours. Yeah.
I can say it's really contextual. We at WSDOT have a lot of things that are legislatively mandated, and so some of them are out of our controls. But what we can do is use our expertise to help create a story for why we need. Well, first of all, we need to understand what the community needs are in the context of the facility, and then for those legislatively mandated, we just need to once we've come to a solution, sometimes it's not necessarily a trade-off for the people, but it's reporting back to our legislative mandates of what we were expected to deliver versus maybe what the true needs are today of the facility. But when we talk about the facilities, it really is contextual. It depends on what all the parameters are in play, what the community wants, what the needs of the corridor are. It's really bringing in the conversation of the team that includes both the professionals at WSDOT and our local partners and the community. So unfortunately, I can't give you a more specific answer than that, because I think it really just does depend.
And I could say for them on the Metro side, at a very high level, developing the 2018 RTP, that's where a majority of engagement and outreach were involved, many more voices at the table. And then subsequently, the 2020 bond measure for transportation funding, again, community prioritization in that. And so we didn't have the budget for that level of engagement. And actually we asked, we're told, no, let's keep it to a smaller scale, obviously, but for the TSMO strategy update, but we were able to build on that for the TSMO strategy. So that at a high level, that's the prioritization that sets up what the desired outcomes are. Then now that you see it in our strategy, and then I was showing you that what goes into the scoring criteria for projects, that's what's changed. So we had 50 out of 100 points on equity criteria alone. And the rest was, sort of what other outcomes are you achieving? How well developed is this project? And then we also had 4 community representatives scoring. Avi helped us score from PSU and a Port of Portland representative, but we purposely made it more voices at the table to go through that. I will say, in the legacy of decision making, we also have Transport, our regional subcommittee, and they are our technical experts on this. And so what we brought the community-based scoring recommendations to that table. Transport agreed with them, and so we got unanimous support for the projects we did pick in that solicitation.
Great. Since we are a bit short of time, maybe Sarita, last question.
Yeah. My question was a little more about considering the geographic disparities in access to public transit, like downtown is much more than many other parts of the city. What are the opportunities or challenges in the future of implementing a much more large scale on-demand public transit, especially in areas that do not have it?
That is a great question. And I would hope to get at that with that mobility on demand kind of strategy work. I've definitely followed a lot of the conversations, and then I have colleagues developing the transit off the transit plan for both high capacity, but also thinking of better bus, which is some of what Pam described. And then I believe we're asking for some support to look at more on-demand transit. So so I think it's a stay tuned answer. Yeah.
Okay, great. Let's thank Pam.
I'm sorry, everyone's cutting out, so I can't hear what was said.
Oh, the question that Sarisha asked, right.
Okay, and I couldn't hear her question either. I apologize. I was trying to see if I could get it when Caleb responded, but if you could repeat it, that'd be great.
It is about looking at on-demand transit services and region-wide where they're needed, especially with equity, I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so we are a state agency, and really we are, we're more of the facilitators of the conversation, and we work with our regional partners, and they're the ones that are leading the way on mobility on demand and other measures. So I can say that I can speak for a public transportation department. I know in the past they were really looking at mobility on demand and how they could create the policies and support for our regions. It's been a little while since I've been in that conversation, but I know it's been a priority in the past for WSDOT. I wish I could give you more than that, but that's, I guess, similar to Caleb, more to come.
Hey, great. Thank you, both. Great. That's all for today. And we'll have our next week's seminar. I forgot the title of it.
Thank you.